It started with flashing red and blue lights and the rhythmic thump of rain against the windshield. Talia Moore kept her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror as she slowly pulled her car to the side of the road. Her breath was calm, collected, despite the adrenaline she knew would be coursing through most people in her position. Her hands raised steadily, she watched as the figure approached. Officer Marcus Grayson, a man with a long history of complaints that mysteriously vanished once they reached internal affairs. Talia knew exactly who he was and what he was capable of, and more importantly, she knew he had no idea who she really was. Dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans, she looked like a young black woman heading home late from a shift, just another face in the city to Officer Grayson. But she was anything but. She was Special Agent Talia Moore of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, deep undercover in one of the Bureau's most dangerous sting operations to date. For months, Grayson had been the subject of whispered complaints. Young women pulled over without cause, groped, threatened, some too scared to even file a report. The few who did were met with skepticism or silence. But Talia wasn't here to complain. She was here to bring him down. Grayson leaned into her window with a crooked smile that didn't reach his eyes. "License and registration," he said, too casually, and she handed them over without hesitation, pretending to fumble like she was nervous. "Where you headed tonight?" he asked, shining his flashlight a little too long into her lap. "Just got off work," she replied, her voice soft, measured. "At the cafe on Madison." He stared at her ID a moment too long, then looked her up and down. "You new around here, Jade?" She nodded. "Moved here for school." He hummed like he didn't believe her. "Be careful. Nights can be rough out here. Especially for girls like you." He handed back her license and walked away. She watched him in the mirror until he disappeared. Her hand didn't tremble as she touched the small microphone embedded in her bra strap. "First contact made," she whispered. "He's definitely hunting." That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, Grayson had become a ghost that kept reappearing. Once at the gas station, pretending it was a coincidence. Another time, sitting in his cruiser at the end of her street, watching as she unlocked her front door. The surveillance van parked a few blocks away caught every interaction, every gesture, every veiled threat. And each time, Talia played her part. Vulnerable, cautious, submissive. But inside, she was calculating. Grayson wasn't just crooked, he was methodical. He liked to test his victims slowly, see what they would allow, then escalate. It was only a matter of time before he overstepped. The Bureau just had to be ready. "He's baiting her," her handler said during a debrief. "He's pushing boundaries. He's going to try something soon." Talia nodded. "Let him." The next night, it happened again. He followed her after she left work, pulled her over for a supposed broken taillight that wasn't broken. "You know," he said, leaning closer than necessary, "you've got a real attitude problem." She said nothing. "You think you're too good to talk to me? That it?" Still, she remained silent. He narrowed his eyes. "Step out of the car." She did, carefully. He circled her, looking her up and down. "Hands on the hood." She complied. His hand grazed her waist as he pretended to check for weapons. Her mic picked up every breath, every word. "What's a pretty thing like you doing in a place like this?" He murmured. "You got someone looking out for you?" She shook her head. "No family in town." He smiled. "Good." That was the moment. The exact moment she knew he was ready to strike. And the Bureau would be ready too. The next day, the team set the trap. Talia drove home on a predetermined route, stopping at a dimly lit gas station just outside of Grayson's patrol zone, then took a back road known for its blind curves and lack of cameras. She knew he was behind her. Her car rolled to a stop just past a wooded curve. She pretended the engine had stalled. Grayson pulled up minutes later. No lights. No sirens. Just his car, creeping behind hers like a shadow. "Car trouble?" he asked with that same false charm. She nodded, playing the part. "Won't start." "Let me take a look," he said. She popped the hood. He peered inside, then stepped closer. "You know, Jade, you've been playing hard to get." She blinked innocently. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't play dumb," he said, his voice lower now. "You think I haven't seen the way you look at me?" She took a half step back. "I think I should call someone." He grinned. "No need for that." He reached for her arm, not knowing the bureau agents were already in position nearby, weapons drawn, waiting for the go signal. But Talia had to make sure he crossed the line. "I don't want any trouble," she said, backing toward her car. "Too late for that," he sneered. That's when he lunged, grabbed her wrist, pinned her against the hood. The second he put his hands on her with force, the forest came alive. Red dots lit up his chest. Hands in the air. "FBI!" shouted a voice from the dark. Grayson froze, stunned. Agents swarmed him, pulling him off her, cuffing him before he could even blink. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. "She's just a suspect." "She's an undercover agent," her handler snapped, flashing his badge. "And you're done." Grayson stared at Talia in shock as she stood tall, pulling the wire from beneath her shirt and revealing her own badge. "You should have checked who you were messing with," she said. The fallout was instant. The news exploded with footage of the takedown. Grayson, disgraced. But it didn't stop there. Talia's operation unearthed more than just his crimes. It exposed a web of corruption spanning half the department. Supervisors who buried complaints. Officers who looked the other way. The FBI raided the precinct, pulling files, emails, text messages. Arrests were made. Careers ended. And at the center of it all stood Talia Moore, the woman they all underestimated. She testified before Congress, her identity now public, telling the story of how a corrupt system preyed on the vulnerable. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She simply told the truth. And the truth was enough. Months later, she walked the same streets where Grayson once prowled, not as Jade Harris, but as Agent Talia Moore, head held high. A new task force had been formed. Reforms were underway. And while the work was far from over, one thing was certain. They'd never see her coming again. Because Talia Moore wasn't just a survivor. She was the storm. And the system would never forget it. But taking down Grayson was only the beginning, because what Talia didn't know until that night was just how deep the rot had spread. After his arrest, the FBI started receiving anonymous tips, records leaked from within the precinct, files that should have been buried showing patterns of misconduct that went back over a decade, and suddenly what started as a sting operation became a full-scale internal probe. Talia was transferred to a classified division working under the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Task Force, but she stayed in the city, watching, learning, digging. Names kept coming up. Officers who signed off on bogus paperwork, judges who quietly dismissed complaints, victims who never got callbacks. And every time she thought the trail had ended, it would twist, leading her deeper into a maze of silence and betrayal. One night, weeks after Grayson's arrest, Talia received a burner call from a blocked number. A voice, raspy and hurried, whispered, "Check the body cam archive. 2017. Warehouse District." Grayson wasn't alone. The call cut off before she could trace it. She dug into the files and what she found made her sick. Footage labeled accidental loss of signal had been tampered with, time codes missing, but the raw metadata embedded in the video file told a different story. Grayson and two other officers were seen dragging a young Latina woman into a warehouse. The footage ended abruptly. That woman had been reported missing days later. No follow-up. No investigation. Just another unsolved case. Talia stared at the screen until her vision blurred. This wasn't just abuse. This was organized, protected, sanctioned by silence. She filed an immediate report with her team, and a covert task unit was greenlit within 24 hours. They reopened cold cases, subpoenaed hidden records, and tracked down former officers who had either quit or been forced out, and what they revealed painted a horrific pattern. Grayson had been part of a small clique inside the department known internally as the Circle. a group of officers who used their authority to traffic influence, intimidate, and allegedly run protection rackets under the guise of patrol. The higher-ups had either looked the other way or actively buried complaints to protect pensions and reputations. But the worst part? Grayson had been under internal review once before, 7 years ago, but the lead investigator closed the file due to insufficient evidence. That investigator was now a deputy chief. Talia stared at the name, L. Harper. She knew what had to be done. She submitted a formal request to reopen the 2017 case and simultaneously began shadowing Deputy Chief Harper's public movements. Her team traced offshore accounts linked to Harper's family, unusual wire transfers, and back-channel communications with a city councilman who had quietly pushed funding to a private security contractor run by a former cop named Benton Ross. Ross had been Grayson's training officer. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a network. So she went deeper. Disguised as a community volunteer, she infiltrated a benefit gala hosted by the councilman, planting bugs in the restrooms and servers' kitchens. The recordings captured Harper saying, "We covered for Grayson once. Can't do it again. They're digging." That was all they needed. The FBI moved in days later. Harper was arrested, and so was Ross. The councilman resigned in disgrace. The case exploded onto national headlines. Systemic cover-up exposed in urban PD. News anchors tried to interview Talia, but she declined, letting the evidence speak for itself. In her final internal report she wrote, "This began with one man's abuse of power, but it ends with an entire system held accountable." Weeks turned into months, and the city slowly began to change. The mayor initiated a citizen oversight committee. Body cam footage was now stored and monitored by a third-party civilian tech company. Reforms passed that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. And through it all, Talia never stopped. She interviewed victims previously ignored, tracked down whistleblowers who feared for their lives, and rebuilt a shattered public trust with quiet resilience. One afternoon, as she left the courthouse after testifying in a separate civil suit against the department, an older black woman approached her. "Are you the agent?" the woman asked. Talia hesitated, then nodded. The woman took her hand gently. "My niece was one of his victims. She didn't make it. But you made her voice heard. Thank you." Talia blinked back tears. She made this possible. All of them did. That night, back in her modest apartment still registered under the name Jade Harris, she opened her laptop and began writing a new report. One not for the bureau, not for a judge or a politician, but for the families. A letter. A testimony. A document that laid out everything that had happened, names redacted, but facts laid bare. It was called The Ones Who Fought Back. She emailed it anonymously to local newsrooms, community activists, and victims' advocacy groups. Within days, it went viral. The city rallied around her words. Protests turned to policy demands. School groups invited her to speak. Colleges asked her to guest lecture on law and ethics. And for the first time in a long time, people believed that change, real change, was possible. But Talia didn't stay in the spotlight. She declined interviews, ignored media requests, and remained focused on her next case. Because corruption wasn't limited to one city or one badge. It was a shadow that moved from place to place, always hiding behind politics and power. And she intended to shine a light on every corner it tried to hide in. Her work led her to a neighboring county where complaints about ICE impersonators and false detainments began surfacing. She changed her identity again. New clothes, new name, new routine, and began the cycle all over. One night, while sitting alone in her car, surveillance mic on, eyes scanning the lot of a dimly lit motel, she remembered something her mentor once told her. Justice doesn't come easy. You have to drag it, kicking and screaming into the light. She smiled. Drag it, she would. Then, a voice crackled over the radio. Target entering the room. We have eyes. She started the car, ready for the next mission. Ready to be underestimated again. Because that was her greatest weapon. Every time they looked at her, they saw what they wanted. A girl with no power. They never saw the badge until it was too late. They never saw the fire until it burned everything they thought they controlled. Talia Moore wasn't just an agent. She was a reckoning. And for every corrupt cop, every closed-door deal, every woman silenced by fear, she was coming. She didn't do it for fame. She didn't do it for recognition. She did it because silence helps the abuser, never the victim. Talia Moore proved that justice starts when one person decides to fight back, no matter the cost. If this story moved you, if you believe in standing up against injustice, then make your voice part of the movement. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories that the system hoped you'd never hear. And remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous to corruption.